A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends, welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And this is episode number 13. And I just want to once again say thank you for listening, and to those who have sent me emails and written reviews on iTunes. It honestly just warms my heart to know that we are on this journey together. So thank you so much. And I'm going to get right into the reading today. We are on chapter 2, the separation and the atonement, section 2, the atonement as defense. So usually when we think of defense, we think of attacking as a defense, often as a defense against a perceived attack towards us. And that type of attack would be the ego's use of defense. And contrasting this section, the atonement as defense, with the last section we read, the origins of separation, where we were told that this dream of separation arose as a defense against God for having separated from him. In other words, we hide in this world pretending it's our home, trying to make it our home. But deep down, we know that this isn't our home. And there's a feeling that something's lacking, a general undertone in all of us of feeling slightly uncomfortable. So contrasting that previous section with this section, atonement as defense, we come to understand that there is no reason to have a defense because there's nothing to defend against. There's no need for this game, this illusion, this dream of separation, that God isn't angry at us. There's nothing to fear. We don't have to feel guilty. We haven't done anything wrong. We just fell asleep and we need to wake up. We're afraid to return home because we all think we've committed this terrible sin of having turned our back against God. And this section is saying that everything's okay. Nothing has happened. The atonement is God's plan of undoing all of this, of the belief in the ego. And the atonement was given to the Holy Spirit to help us awaken from the dream. You may recall that the atonement is defined as a correction for the ego's thought system. So in that sense, it's the Holy Spirit's defense against the ego. So what does it mean that it's a defense? It means that even though the ego is nothing, it's just a thought with no real lasting eternal effects. It means that from where we believe we are, from our decision to choose the ego as our teacher, our defense against that choice is now the atonement. We now choose the atonement, which says the ego and its stream of guilt and fear have no power over me. It's a denial of what the ego has made. Okay, so we'll start with paragraph 1, sentence 1. You can do anything I ask. All right, that's an interesting way to start this off. So Jesus is saying that anything that he's asking us to do, we have the capability of doing that, whether that is doing the workbook lessons, which he's asking us to do, reading this text, shifting our perception with the miracle. All those things we can do. 2, I have asked you to perform miracles and have made it clear that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. So he's asking us to perform these shifts of perception, which is that miracle, from fear to love. And he's trying to help us understand that you really do want to do this, that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal, as opposed to the ego's thought system, which is full of separation, guilt, and fear, and actually very unnatural to who we are. 3, there is nothing they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt or fear. So they, meaning miracles, they can't be performed in the spirit of doubt or fear because doubt or fear comes from the ego thought system. So those qualities are coming from our wrong mind, and the miracle, of course, is coming from our right mind. 4, when you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. So what we're afraid of hurts us. So even if that thing in and of itself doesn't have the potential to hurt us, we just believe that it hurts us. It's like somebody who comes in with to hypnotherapy with a phobia of spiders. That spider may not have any potential to hurt that person in reality, but the fear is hurting them because they're afraid of it. So anything that you're afraid of, you're giving power to. 5, remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. So in other words, we just believe in what we project, and whatever we're valuing at that time, whether it's the illusion or whether it's the Holy Spirit, that's what we'll see in the world and in our experience. 6, you believe in what you value. So we believe in the illusion because we value the illusion. We believe that this world is real. We believe that we're victims because that's what the ego tells us. 7, if you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. So we're valuing the illusion or the ego thought system over the Holy Spirit. 8, your understanding will then inevitably value wrongly, and by endowing all thoughts with equal power, will inevitably destroy your peace. So the fear and the guilt limits our understanding. And because we have that cloud of fear and guilt, we then will value wrongly. 9, that is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God, which passeth understanding. So what that means is that the peace of God is greater than our understanding from the perspective of a mind stuck in the ego thought system. 10, this peace is totally incapable of being shaken by errors of any kind. So that's another way of saying that nothing has happened. That's the message of the atonement, that you can undo the ego thought system because it isn't real. So this peace of God is totally incapable of being shaken by this error of separation. 11, it denies the ability of anything not of God to affect you. So this peace is stronger than anything we can make in this world. So here he's contrasting the ego's use of denial to deny that you have the power to make this dream, this world, and become rather a victim of the world. That's the ego's use of denial. It denies our reality, whereas Jesus is contrasting that denial with the Holy Spirit's use of denial. So this love and peace of God denies the ego thought system. It denies anything to affect us. 12, this is the proper use of denial. Again, as opposed to the ego's use of denial, which asks us to deny everything, to deny any responsibility, to deny our spiritual self, to deny that we are powerful, creative beings. 13, it is not used to hide anything, but to correct error. So again, we made this world in order to come and hide. And we hide from what we perceive as God's wrath. So this is saying that the proper use of denial is not to hide anything, because there is nothing to hide, but rather just to correct that error in your mind, that there is something to even be corrected. 14, it brings all error into the light. And since error and darkness are the same, it corrects error automatically. So when you're shifting your perception to the miracle, that's when the light in your mind shows you the truth of the separation. So it separates out the true from the false, as we've heard in the principles of miracles. Okay, so again, the ego made the world of separation this illusion and then denies it made anything at all. And the Holy Spirit uses denial to deny what the ego has made. 2, true denial is a powerful protective device. True denial is saying you can't be hurt by anything. 2, you can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you. So in other words, you should deny the world has any power to hurt you in any way. 3, this kind of denial is not a concealment, but a correction. So again, we're not hiding, we're bringing that error of perception to the truth and correcting it through the atonement. 4, your right mind depends on it. Because we can't know what's in our right mind. We can't know that peace of God, as it was referring to earlier, by holding on to error. 5, denial of error is a strong defense of truth, but denial of truth results in miscreation, the projections of the ego. So when we deny who we are, that's when all the problems happen. We project that denial, that lack, or that guilt and fear inside of us and project it outside onto other people, into our behaviors, overeating, or being angry, or staying in poverty, or any way that we use that idea of lack in order to miscreate. Those are the projections of the ego. Again, it's a natural dynamic of your mind to just project out what's in it. So if we're holding on to that ego thought system of sin, guilt, and fear, that's what we will project out in the world. And then, of course, that's what we will see. The world will attest to that belief system. 6, in the service of the right mind, the denial of error frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. So again, we talked about free will in the last episode, in the last section, this idea that when we align our mind with God, then our will becomes free. It's imprisoned, meaning our mind is imprisoned, when we are in alignment with the ego. 7, when the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. So there's no miscreations, there's no misperceptions in a mind that's joined with the love of God. And another way to look at that is in your daily life. When you continually surrender your perception and stay aligned to the Holy Spirit, you can trust the outcome. You can remember that everything is serving a higher purpose. So no matter what obstacles you come across, in terms of that's how your ego would perceive it, an obstacle or a challenge in your daily life, the Holy Spirit would see it as a process, as part of your atonement in undoing your ego. 3, you can defend truth as well as error. So that's just another way of saying you can't serve two masters. You can't serve truth and error. You can't defend both the ego thought system and the Holy Spirit. 2, the means are easier to understand after the value of the goal is firmly established. So when you establish that goal of peace for yourself, then those obstacles, as I'm calling them obstacles, but that's how your ego would interpret it. So in other words, the things that arise in your daily life, those things would be interpreted by the Holy Spirit as simply a way of bringing you to that goal of peace. They would be the lessons that you need to shift your mind about. 3, it is a question of what is it for? So this is the most important question that you could ever ask yourself. What is it for? As you go through your daily life, as you do your normal behaviors and activities, you continually check in with yourself and ask yourself, what is it for? What is this for? In other words, who is this serving? Is it serving my ego, or is it serving the Holy Spirit? Is it aiding more fear and guilt, or is it aiding love and peace in my life? Am I using this food in order to stay stuck in my ego, or am I using this food in order to sustain love and health and peace? And you can do that with anything. You go to a social gathering and you ask yourself, what is it for? My only purpose here is to serve love. So when you set that goal at the beginning, then everything becomes a means of achieving that goal. And then it becomes about something higher. It becomes about your own spiritual growth rather than just going to this party. It becomes a way to challenge yourself to grow and expand by extending love. And when you do that, then, and you set that purpose, the ego disappears in that because you're constantly focused on extending love in some form or another. Or if somebody says something to you that might have been hurtful in the past, you reinterpret it with the voice of the Holy Spirit and see them as coming from fear. And again, if somebody's coming from fear, the natural response is love. So it's a very important question to constantly ask yourself. I mean, you don't want to get too crazy about it, but you want to check in with yourself and just say, what is this for? And as you begin to practice it in your daily life, and like I said, in those relationships and experiences that you have, or events or work, or whatever it is, then once you make some conscious efforts to doing that, let's say for a month or so, it just becomes natural. It's a habituated response. You might not say to yourself, what is this for? But on some level, you're recognizing that it's another opportunity to extend love and to grow yourself as a spiritual being. 4, everyone defends his treasure and will do so automatically. So what is it for? Is it for the ego or the Holy Spirit? Because you will defend whatever you're using it for. 5, the real questions are, what do you treasure and how much do you treasure it? Do you treasure the illusion over oneness? Do you treasure separation over joining? Do you treasure love over fear? 6, once you have learned to consider these questions and to bring them into all your actions, you will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. So then once you surrender this and ask this question, whatever you're doing, you're very clear on what the means of that is. You're clear on the purpose that that relationship is serving, or you're clear on the purpose of what that social function is serving. You're clear on the purpose of what that job is serving. 7, the means are available whenever you ask. So when you surrender this social situation to the Holy Spirit, when you surrender your job to the Holy Spirit, you can have those shifts of perception. Whenever you ask to have a shift of perception, it will occur for you as long as you have the little willingness to see the situation differently. 8, you can, however, save time if you do not protract this step unduly. So you can save time if you allow yourself to have the willingness to have your perception healed. Obviously, if you stay stuck in the ego and in being right and using situations on a daily basis to serve your ego, you'll stay stuck in time and space. The world and dream of separation will continue to exist. 9, the correct focus will shorten it immeasurably, meaning time. The whole purpose of time is to shift our perception and to awaken. So if you're doing that every day, then you don't need to keep coming back over and over and over again to learn that lesson. Paragraph 4, the atonement is the only defense that cannot be used destructively because it is not a device you made. So everything else in this world we can use destructively because we made it. But we can't use the atonement for destruction because it's beyond destruction. It's beyond the ego thought system. 2, the atonement principle was in effect long before the atonement began. The atonement principle is the principle of love, the principle that nothing has happened, the principle of reality of our oneness with God. 3, the principle was love, and the atonement was an act of love. So the idea or principle of the atonement, which is love, has always been there, obviously. That's what is eternal, the love of God, our love. And the atonement then was an act, meaning that it was created only because we acted and had this thought of separation. So there needed to be a counteract to that thought, and that was the atonement. 4. Acts were not necessary before the separation because belief in space and time did not exist. The world didn't exist. We didn't have this belief in separation, so we didn't need an act to correct that belief. 5. It was only after the separation that the atonement and the conditions necessary for its fulfillment were planned. Okay, I think that's what we just talked about. 6. Then a defense so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. So we can't misuse it for destruction, but we can ignore it. We can pretend that it doesn't exist. We can seek the ego's counsel, which tells us that the world is real, that we are victims, and we can ignore that voice of the Holy Spirit and his atonement plan in our mind. That's our only real choice. 7. Refusal could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of other defenses. So all of the defenses that the ego made in this world, including this world, the Course is saying was used as a weapon of attack. You could say that this entire world was made as an attack on God. And there's other thought systems that share similar spiritual universal themes, as the Course says. What makes it unique is that A Course in Miracles is the only thought system that says that the world was made as an attack on God. I don't know any other thought system that says that. 8. The atonement thus becomes the only defense that is not a two-edged sword. The ego will tell us that it will protect us and that if we listen to it, it will keep us safe. But actually, what it says we need in order to feel safe is the actual thing that turns around and hurts us. So I always use addiction as examples in some of these ego dynamics because on one hand, I guess I see it almost every day as a hypnotherapist, and it's just sort of an extreme example. Even though we don't have any addictions, perhaps, we all are addicted to the ego thought system. But if somebody is addicted to cigarettes, let's say, they have anthropomorphized those cigarettes, and they believe that the cigarettes are their best friend, and that the cigarette is there to help them. And when I talk to smokers, they talk about cigarettes as their protector or their friend or the only one who's been there through the trials and tribulations, good times and bad. And so they have a very special relationship to their cigarettes. Yet the truth is that the cigarettes are hurting them because it's poisonous and it hurts your body. So that's sort of an example of a double-edged sword of the ego. Paragraph 5. The atonement was built into the space-time belief to set a limit on the need for the belief itself and ultimately to make learning complete. So the atonement was set into motion, this plan, because we needed it. We needed a way out of the space-time continuum that we're caught in of sin, guilt, and fear. And ultimately, it's saying to make learning complete, because the atonement is the way that we awaken through the miracle, which is part of the atonement. 2, the atonement is the final lesson. So awakening from the dream and undoing our ego thought system. That's the final thing that we need to learn. 3, learning itself, like the classrooms in which it occurs, is temporary. So you could see this world as a classroom. And I think that that's a good perspective of this world. And just like learning, this classroom is only temporary. Eventually, we don't need to learn anymore. Eventually, you learn arithmetic and you don't need to learn it anymore. Eventually, you learn your lessons of atonement and you don't need to learn anymore. 4, the ability to learn has no value when change is no longer necessary. So learning is the same as change. It's all needed in a split mind, a mind that believes that it is separate from God. And when your mind is at one with God, changeless, then of course learning is no longer necessary. 5, the eternally creative have nothing to learn. We have nothing to learn because we already know our oneness, our reality, and our truth. 6, you can learn to improve your perceptions and can become a better and better learner. So while we're in this world, it's very important to improve our perceptions. We want to become better learners. That's why we have the workbook. The entire workbook is helping us to change that perception and improve it and become a better learner. 7, this will bring you into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. So in reality, with a capital R, the sonship is perfect. And again, perfection is not a matter of degree, just like you can't be a little bit pregnant. You are created perfect. Everyone is created perfect. Underneath all of the ego ranting and ravings and victimization and victimizing is perfection, is the innocence, is the truth of who those people are and who we are. We're just stuck in this terrible idea of separation. 8, only while there is a belief in differences is learning meaningful. So only while there is a belief that you and I are different, that we are different from animals, that we are different from anything here, that we are different from the person who is a serial killer, then our learning isn't completed. And of course, on this level in the world, we are different from that person who's a mass murderer. But it's saying that we need to recognize the truth and look beyond the illusions of what people do to who they are. Paragraph 6. Evolution is a process in which you seem to proceed from one degree to the next. So from our level of perception, evolution seems to be a process. In this world, it is a process. It's a slow process of awakening, of cleansing the doors of perception and remembering our truth. 2, you correct your previous missteps by stepping forward. So as you continue to focus on moving forward and shifting your perception with the lessons that show up today in your life, you're actually healing the past as well. 3, this process is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because you return as you go forward. So you return back to the beginning, to the pre-separation state, to oneness. And that's why as you go forward learning your lessons, as we move through each lifetime, so to speak, we're undoing and correcting that ego thought system, which takes us back to the beginning, to before we fell asleep, if that makes sense. 4, the atonement is the device by which you can free yourself from the past as you go ahead. So accepting that principle of undoing the ego thought system, accepting the correction in our mind, is what frees ourselves to go forward. 5, it undoes your past errors, thus making it unnecessary for you to keep retracing your steps without advancing to your return. And I think I just touched on that. 6, in this sense, the atonement saves time because, like the miracle it serves, does not abolish it. So the miracle and the atonement are needed in time. Returning home, awakening from the dream, that's what abolishes time, so to speak. 7, as long as there is need for atonement, there is need for time. So as long as there is this world, as long as we are asleep, there is a need for time. It will serve the Holy Spirit's purpose. rather than the egos. Again, if we surrender our time, our day to the Holy Spirit. 8. But the atonement as a completed plan has a unique relationship to time. 9. Until the atonement is complete, its various phases will proceed in time, but the whole atonement stands at time's end. And the reason the atonement stands at time's end is because the atonement is saying nothing has happened. The atonement was the plan to correct the ego's thought system. It undoes the ego. So it stands at the end saying everything has already been undone. You just need to choose to accept the Holy Spirit's perception of whatever situation or this whole world instead of the ego's. 10. At that point, the bridge of return has been built. So at that point, in the end, we've already built that bridge of undoing our ego through the miracle and the lessons that we have shifted our perception about. 7. The atonement is a total commitment. Again, you can either view the world through the ego or you can view the world through the Holy Spirit. You can't view the world a little bit through the ego and a little bit through the Holy Spirit at the same time. You can vacillate between the two, but if you choose to undo the ego, that's a total commitment. 2, you may still think this is associated with loss, a mistake all the separated sons of God make in one way or another. So when it says you may still think this is associated with loss, we still think that choosing the Holy Spirit is a weakness. We think that there's still power in choosing the ego over God. And so that's why the world is the way it is, because everybody values the ego, values separation, values individuality, values nationality. And so that creates all of these fragments and divisions. And we think there's strength in that. So when someone comes along and says, let go of that perception of individuality, let go of that perception of separation, the ego comes out swinging and says, don't do that. If you do that, you'll disappear. But the truth is, if we do choose that, the ego will disappear. So we have this sense of loss that comes with choosing the ego, and that's why nobody does it. It's completely twisted and turned upside down in our minds. And that's why this course is the way it is, because it's slowly trying to chip away at this thought in our mind that when we choose the ego, we will win. And that's how you eventually begin to release the ego, is by choosing the Holy Spirit, choosing to forgive, choosing to let go of the belief in separation, choosing a higher perception of a situation in your life. When you begin to choose that, you start to see that you feel more peaceful, that you feel safe, that you're not disappearing in that moment. And then it makes it easier the next time to choose the Holy Spirit or the perception of love, rather than your fear or anxiety or the idea of separation and victimization. And so as you slowly begin to have these miracles, that attest to that strength within you. And that's how you begin to feel more and more comfortable in choosing the Holy Spirit. But until you start to actually practice that, to make conscious decisions, you will interpret choosing the ego as loss. 3, it is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. So see, that's just what I was talking about. We believe that we need to fortify ourselves because the world is going to attack us, because people are going to attack us. We need to be protected against the world. We're programmed by that the minute we get into the world. We're vaccinated and told that the world is fearful, the world is scary. So you need this as a defense against other people who are going to give you diseases, against the world. And I'm not making a statement on vaccinations. I'm just saying that's the way that this world is set up from the moment we get here. Everything is an attack against us. And so no wonder we're frightened. No wonder we're trying to just hold our own space and protect ourselves. It's saying it's hard to believe that this defense, which is just saying nothing has happened, is a good defense. It goes against the programming that we've had our whole lives and generations before us. 4. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. So by meek, the Course is saying those who are defenseless, those who are not attacking. We can see Gandhi as a perfect example of this. He literally was defenseless and was able to save India. 5. They will literally take it over because of their strength. Now, this reminds me of lesson 153 in the workbook. Lesson 153 is, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. And you may want to read over this lesson at some point this week because it really speaks to exactly what this section is talking about, the ego's defenses versus God's protection. 6. A two-way defense is inherently weak precisely because it has two edges and can be turned against you very unexpectedly. The ego is dicey. The ego can tell you again that it protects you, but then that it can turn whatever it's using against you and that protection against you and really hurt you unexpectedly too. 7. This possibility cannot be controlled except by miracles. It's saying that you can't control it on the level of the world. You have to control that ego dynamic through shifting your perception by going back to your mind. That's your way out, is through your mind. 8, the miracle turns the defense of atonement to your real protection. And as you become more and more secure, you assume your natural talent of protecting others, knowing yourself as both a brother and a son. The miracle turns our attention to our real protection, which is the love of God, which is the idea of the atonement that nothing really happened. And it says, and as you become more and more secure, assuming that place, assuming your natural talent, your natural role as a miracle worker, you begin to protect others. So you protect them by not projecting guilt and separation onto them. You protect them by extending the love of God, by extending oneness to them. That goes to everything and everyone, including animals in this world. You see everything outside of yourself, as one with you. And that's how you begin to protect the sonship, and you protect yourself. Okay, I think we'll stop there. And if you'd like to stay in touch with me, I'm on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy, or on Twitter, and my handle is Cynthia S, as in Sam, Morgan. Or you can visit my website at www.cynthiamorgan.us, or email me at acourseinwhat@gmail.com. And I always love hearing from fellow course students as well. So, all right, we always end with the summary of A Course in Miracles, and I would love you to say it with me. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.